Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar jointly hosted by AccSource and Bridgepoint Group. And today's topic is a very interesting topic. In fact, Brad and myself, we were just talking about. It's kind of a complicated topic, but it is a topic, that's needed in today's business world. Now, why we chose this topic? If you look at it in today's business scenario, one of the significant challenge is to effectively lead the people across the layers of the organization. In fact, I just wanted to take a context of what the businesses have gone through in the last, maybe 40 years. In the last 40 years, if you look at the businesses have gone through from an industrial revolution to an information revolution to a social revolution. And what I mean by industrial revolution, information revolution, and social revolution is that we all started with a question of survival. Survival. So it was a mode of survival. It was very easy for us to lead people because there was a lot of adaptability skills. Then we moved from survival mode to information mode, where it's about the standard of living, which means it started kind of giving us a bit of more challenges because people were more concerned on the standard of living than on the survival mode. And now from information revolution, we have moved to a social revolution where it's not even about the standard of living, it's about the quality of living. And the only reason why I'm highlighting these three revolution that has happened in the last 40 years is that that has given significant challenges to all of us as leaders. And in today's world, leading an organization really requires a charismatic leader who can balance the expectations of different stakeholders at the same time leading the business towards success. And that's why we thought this is kind of a complicated topic and a topic of the day. And with that kind of setting a tone and context, I leave it to Brad. Brad will kind of briefly introduce about himself and then kickstart the webinar. Brad, to you, mate.
Thanks heaps for that, Babalan. And yeah, absolutely. Very insightful point you mentioned there. And it just goes to show how important it is, just as a general point, we always need to be focusing on building our soft skills, and our EQ, our emotional intelligence, to make sure that we can keep up with the societal changes that are taking place, especially in organizations. So we've chosen this topic as well, the missing elements of leadership in your organization, because we want to explore not just about what leadership is, but we want to talk more to the how. And we want to give you tools and strategies that you can take away so that you can think more deeply about your ability to lead and influence others. And also implement key changes that are going to serve you as a person in your personal life, as well as in a professional capacity, and also benefit your employees. So very quickly, a little bit about Bridgepoint Group and myself. So Bridgepoint Group has been around since 2011. We're a boutique accounting and growth advisory firm based in North Sydney. As you can see there, we specialize in tax and accounting, legal, innovation, corporate and business advisory. I head up the business advisory division. So my position enables me, and with great privilege, to connect with a lot of different business owners from different industries and dig deep and gain great insight into their leadership journeys, how they go with developing themselves as a leader, as well as developing others as leaders, as well as all the cultural challenges that come along with leadership and culture development as well. So thankfully, it's not only something that I'm passionate about through my studies in human resources management, but it's also something that I live and breathe every day and have the privilege of working with lots of people and gaining great insights. So this webinar is a combination, if you will, of knowledge, experience, resources, learnings that I've learned along the way. And I trust that you'll gain some great value out of today as well. So just in terms of today's agenda, we'll go through some key statistics on leadership and its impacts on employees, what stops organizations from having great leadership, the 5 missing elements of leadership, how to turn managers into leaders. So just a quick show of hands, just to make sure your arms are working properly. Who here is looking to help turn their managers into leaders? If you've got a management team that you take care of, or a leadership team, are you here to gain some tools and insight around how you can help your leaders become better leaders? Just a quick show of hands there. Okay. Awesome. Then we'll do a recap, some live Q&A if we have time. I trust we will, and then a bonus giveaway, which I'll share with you at the end. Now, just a bit of housekeeping as well. This webinar and any webinars that AccSource and Bridgepoint do together, they're not here to entertain you. They're here to educate, inspire, and empower you. And we really want to encourage your participation, even if you're not talking, but just encouraging very active listening. Free yourself from any distractions. This is a 1 hour block that you can fully dedicate to developing yourself as a leader. So please just make sure that you listen intently, sincerely, and take notes as well. So make sure that you've got a pen and paper there too. Another disclaimer as well, the conversation doesn't start and end on this webinar. This is just the beginning of the conversation. It's to generate thinking, and it's to ask you questions as opposed to just giving you a whole bunch of answers. So really want to make sure that this webinar reminds you that leadership is a never-ending journey. There is no pill, there is no magic bullet, a silver bullet. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to leadership. As Babalan and I discussed before, it is very complex. There's so many dimensions. There's 1,000 different exceptions. So please just take that all into consideration as we go about the webinar, and understand that I probably will generalize quite a bit. And so some of the generalizations won't make sense to your situation. But allow for that, because there are a lot of exceptions throughout this journey. So I think I've covered off everything. Let me just have a look here. Yep, that's pretty much everything there. So what we'll do, just to add to the context and really emphasize why this is so important, is through some key statistics. So only 48% of employees view their company's leadership as high quality. 79% of employees will quit due to the lack of appreciation. Quick show of hands, or a thumbs up, or some form of engagement if you've left a previous company because you weren't appreciated, or you've had an experience where you weren't appreciated. I'm sure some of you, yep. $366 billion US is spent on leadership development each year. 77% of businesses report that leadership is lacking. 69% of employees say they would work harder if they felt that their efforts were better recognized. Only 33% of employees report feeling engaged. Imagine if the other 77% were engaged. I wonder what that would do for your company. 1 in 2 people state that they've left a job at some point to get away from a bad manager. So once again, show of hands if that's been the case for anyone. Just want to make sure you're engaging and your arms are working. Great. And companies with employee engagement are 22% more profitable. So if you're sitting there right now and maybe you think that your employees aren't engaged, and you know how profitable or not profitable you are, if you had an extra 22% on your bottom line, what position would that put you in? And I guess that serves as a pretty good incentive to maybe pay more attention or give more care to leadership in your organization, if that's a fair comment. And for every year a company delays leadership development, it costs 7% of their total annual sales. That's an interesting one. Once again, this is just to provide a bit of context and help reinforce to us why leadership really does matter. So what stops organizations from having a great leadership team? And now at the end, we'll have a little bit of a group discussion and maybe get a couple of you to unmute yourself. Just want to make sure, though, you don't go on a tangent for too long. And it's not to be rude or disrespectful. It's just to know that there's a lot to cover. So if you are going to share and you want to unmute yourself, make it valuable for everyone else. Make it sharp and to the point so that we can get as many people engaging and sharing their thoughts as well. So upper management not valuing or understanding the role that human behavior plays in organizational success. So to drill down a bit more, there tends to be too much about just what gets done and when it's getting done, which is more of a management mindset, instead of the who is doing it or who they're showing up to be when they're doing it. Why they're doing it in a particular way and how they're doing it or how they could do it better, which is more of a leadership mindset. Lack of investment, care, time, and money in leadership and culture development. It's just not a priority. Maybe for you, it's just about sales coming in the door or staying afloat. The third one is probably the most important thing that I see in organizations that I work with and speak with on a daily basis. And it's poor management of the business basics. So not having strong enough standards or being consistent enough around time and task management, hitting certain targets that need to be hit to keep the lights on, reporting, and lack of accountability. And therefore, because this isn't being managed, the basics, taking out the trash, doing the housekeeping, you remain stuck in a state of reactivity and survival with little time to focus on those softer intangibles, the things that are going to help improve the business, improve other people. So I've got here my notes that often a lot of business owners are stuck in a state of necessity and reactivity and doing what must be done for yesterday, right? Or let alone for today, instead of being in a state of possibility and doing what can be done today for a better tomorrow. A lot of us are focused on keeping up with the demands of yesterday and the demands of today. So stuck in that state of urgency, doing things that are important and urgent, if I can refer to the Eisenhower matrix around time management. If you haven't heard of that, probably a good something to write down, the Eisenhower matrix, and it will help you reflect on you staying stuck in a state of doing things that were meant to be taken care of yesterday or things that are urgent. Lack of accountability and responsibility due to skill and knowledge gaps as well. What impacts on quality of leadership in organizations is the lack of courage or vulnerability to have those confronting, messy, and often difficult conversations. Can I get a show of hands? Who here feels that they would be a greater leader if they felt more confident and comfortable in having difficult conversations? Can I get a show of hands? And if you don't have your camera on, would love for you to have your camera on and just give a thumbs up as well. Your engagement is very much valued in the webinar. So if you're sitting there kind of hiding with your camera off when you could in fact have it on, please, I encourage you to turn it on. It's always nice to connect with you all and see your faces. And thanks for your engagement. And then lastly, too many travel agents. So a lot of people talking the talk, but not walking the talk themselves. Travel agents is a term that I picked up from John Maxwell. He says that too many leaders are travel agents. They're like travel agents. They're trying to lead other people to destinations that they haven't yet gone themselves. So that's an interesting little metaphor. So what I'd like to do is just get maybe one or two of you to unmute yourself, or raise your hand first of all, and then Nirmal, if you can unmute them, and just maybe share what you think stops organizations from having a great leadership team, or maybe comment on what we've already discussed. Anyone want to share something? Anyone raise their hand? Just raise your hand if your camera's on, and feel free to, if you want to. If not, that's fine. Or maybe from your own personal experience, what do you think can get in the way of you developing your leadership ability, or maybe your team? And if no one wants to respond or contribute, maybe it's just something to have a bit more of a think about. No one's raised their hand there, Nirmal? No? All good. I'll take...
maybe Liz has, but I'm not sure if it's an accident.
Who was that? Sorry, Nirmal?
Liz and Brown.
Okay, let's find out. No one wanted to share there? That's all right. Oh, Liz, no, it was an accident. No worries at all. Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll continue. So the 5 missing elements of leadership and what your organization needs. So I'm sure some of these will be of no surprise, but it's about doing them well. So as I said, there's no magic, there's no silver bullet magic recipe that's going to save the day for you in your business. It's about applying principles thinking here and having a look at the raw dynamics of leadership itself. Okay, so you as the leader and your team, those individuals, as well as the interaction, the space in between you as the leader and your team members. So as you can see here, we've got a greater degree of self-awareness. The reason I wrote a greater degree of self-awareness instead of just self-awareness is because we're all self-aware, but to varying degrees. And the greater degree of self-awareness you can cultivate and develop is going to determine the impact you have as a leader. Missing element number 2, a greater degree of others awareness. Missing element number 3, a greater degree of relationship awareness. So this is about honoring and understanding the space in between you and your team members. 4, a lack of leadership and culture development goals. So not being able to clearly define the direction that you're heading in as a leader or for your culture. And then 5, not having the right tools and models or tools and models at all to reference to help you along your journey. Because let's face it, the leadership and culture development journey can be messy, can be complex. There's a lot of, it's not black and white. It's full of shades of gray. And if we can have some models that are tried and tested and that have made an impact and made a difference in business in general and have been around for decades, then it's important that we consider what those models have to share with us, because we don't need to try and reinvent the wheel and navigate the chaos that occurs within the whole leadership journey. Can I get a show of hands if that'll make sense? And if you feel that these five missing elements are crucial to gain greater awareness around. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the first one. Before I change slides, I just want to share with you all, do your best to not allow yourself to become overwhelmed with the information that I'm going to share with you. It's important to just take it all in at a high level. And just know, if you want a copy of the webinar afterwards to serve as a resource, because I really want this to serve as a resource for you, feel free to send an email through to me and I'll share more information on that shortly. Excuse me. So a greater degree of self-awareness. So self-awareness, knowing how you carry yourself as a business owner, leader, manager, and how this is either growing you or keeping you stagnant. So comment here, we are wired physiologically, mentally, emotionally to maintain the status quo. We are not only advanced, evolved beings, but we're also quite primal in the sense that we're seeking familiarity and certainty all the time. So often when change or uncertainty comes along, or we've got an opportunity to create change and improve, often we can perceive that as a threat. So just know that there's always, and it's important to acknowledge that there's always a force innately within us that is often trying to slow down our growth and perpetuate remaining the same. So let's just have a look at these at a high level, what we want to develop a greater degree of self-awareness around our beliefs. So your beliefs as a leader and your leadership style and how effective it is. For instance, if you're always putting yourself down or you're always propping yourself up, potentially that's perpetuating a more or less dysfunctional way of being a leader in your organization. Values, so what you value, care about, read about, focus on, give time and energy to, and how that is impacting your business positively or negatively. You might come across some leaders that value power, and maybe they're not really a leader, they're more of a dictator. You might have people that really value collaboration and relationships. Maybe they're more effective than the dictator, or maybe in some cases, maybe not. I'll leave that thought with you to reflect on. Assumptions, so your assumptions about employees, about performance and results, about culture and levels of engagement. So often I come across business owners that think because they're not receiving feedback that everything's good. That's certainly not the case. It could just be because the leader is unapproachable or the communication standards have completely dropped. Judgments, so how you're judging yourself and how you project or overlay that onto other people in the organization, and your self-talk, how critically you judge yourself. Maybe you're judging yourself because you can't handle having difficult conversations. Maybe you call yourself weak or scared, or maybe you're judging yourself in some other disempowering way that's affecting your level to lead your organization. Blind spots. So what are you constantly pushing under the carpet, unconsciously or consciously? So what aren't you focusing on to avoid that thing? And what are you focusing on to avoid other things that could be really important? And how is this stopping you from gaining access to insights, learnings, and growth? A big one here is, everyone, is standards and expectations. I come across it with leaders all the time, is because they're afraid of their team members leaving or hurting people's feelings, they're prioritizing people's feelings ahead of actually getting things done that they were actually employed to do. And then they're almost developing more of a servant charity mindset, which disempowers you as the business owner, and it also lets your employees get away with everything. So standards and expectations, standards that you hold for yourself and expectations you hold for others is incredibly important. Attitude and energy, I won't dive deep into that. Openness to feedback, so how open are you to receiving feedback and how frequently are you seeking it out? How open are you as a leader to be challenged and wrong about something, and then openly sharing how you were wrong about it? So how approachable and available are you for other people is massive. Decision making, how are you making decisions as a leader? And what are your main drivers for decision making? Is it based on evidence and data? Is it just based on your own feelings, stuck in your own world of assumptions and biases? Are you looking for consensus from others? Is it all about risk mitigation and avoiding pain, or is it about seeking pleasure and taking a chance? Leadership style, this is a big one, and we could have a whole webinar on this, of course, but essentially it's a concept. Are you leading from the front, the middle, or the back? Are you passive or confrontational? Do you manage and maintain, or do you lead and inspire? So the whole manager versus leader frame to look through. Do you default to controlling everyone and everything around you, or default to allowing? Or do you adapt based on what the moment or the situation needs as a leader? So these are just some things in the leadership style for you to look at. There's some other good ones. Do you talk up to people? Do you talk down to people, or do you talk with people? So are you constantly focused on trying to position yourself as above others, below others, or with others? Very important, very, very important to consider that point, as well as self-reflection. How often do you self-reflect? So I know I've just thrown a lot at you, right? I want to give you more instead of not enough, and just take it all in at a high level at the moment. And I'd love for someone to maybe unmute themselves or type in the chat if you want to. Which one stands out for you the most that you would like to dig into a little bit more, investigate a little bit more within yourself? It could be your beliefs, could be your values and how that's impacting you, could be your assumptions, could be how you make decisions. It could be your standards for yourself and expectations for others. I'd love for you to write in the chat what it is for you. Remember, we're after your engagement. I'm not here to entertain you. We want to try and make it as much of a two-way conversation as possible, despite me throwing a lot of information at you. So we've had someone share their blind spots. What else? And if you can't think of one, write them all down. Greg, I can see you in deep thought there, mate. Is anything in particular coming up for you? Maybe we can unmute Greg and put you on the spot for a second, if that's all right, Greg.
Yeah, I'm thinking of leadership styles. You know, work with a
Leadership.
management team.
Yep.
And there is different management styles within that leadership team. So it's a key one for me.
Yeah, okay, awesome. What about Office 365_002? The lady in the red. I don't have your name there. Would you mind unmuting her, Nirmal?
I think she'll have to unmute her. Hello, mic.
If you don't want to interact or engage for whatever reason, just you're on mute. Sorry, I can see you trying to talk.
There's a button on the right top corner which says mic. You'll have to unmute yourself before.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
I said
We can
blind
hear you.
spot.
Oh, blind spots. Oh, awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Fantastic. And why blind spots for you, if you don't mind me asking?
I just think that's something I've never thought about.
Yep.
You know, there may be areas that I don't focus on and avoid, or, you know, don't consciously avoid, but avoid.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Who else here agrees? And sorry, what was your name? It's not showing up. Therese.
Therese.
Who else here had blind spots as an interesting one to reflect on? Give a thumbs up or wave your hand or comment in the chat. Your engagement is very welcome. Okay. And a trick question for you all, or maybe I shouldn't have said that, but who here is aware of their blind spots? No one, right? Because there are blind spots. So if anyone were to put their hand up, I would have been like, oh, okay, something's going on here. So, and just on that note, often as humans, in a lot of cases, we tend to think we're a couple of steps or levels ahead on our development journey than we are. So it's always good to check in with ourselves and go, well, how can I humble myself a little bit more right now? Because I might not have it all figured out. And sometimes, you know, we're individual egoic beings. Sometimes we can get in our own way and think that our better's made and we've got it all figured out, when in fact, it's a lifelong journey, right? So this developing a greater degree of self-awareness, as you all know, and as I know and remind myself, this is a never-ending journey. And if we want to expect more of others, at the same time, we should inspect ourselves. Okay, I'm just going to jump on to the next one here. So a greater degree of others' awareness. What we'll focus on in this slide for the most part will be Penner's level of engagement and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we'll go through them swiftly. So others' awareness. So knowing what drives and motivates employees, what they do to grow or stagnate, and where their developmental gaps are. So just reflect for a moment on your team members. How do they hide? What are they doing to remain stuck? What are they shying away from? And then how can you as a business owner help them? What are those developmental gaps? And we'll get to that on the next slide. Just some food for thought. So once again, similar for you, understanding their beliefs about work, about performance, about taking responsibility, about communicating. How well do you know your team members, the people that are standing before you and working for you? Values, what do they care about? What do they talk about? And what insights can you gain from that that gives you greater insight in terms of how they perform and show up in business and how they contribute to the culture? Are they contributing in a positive or negative way? And if they're not contributing, well, Stephen Covey sees that as contributing negatively anyway. The 6 core needs by Anthony Robbins. So looking at your team members and employees through the lens of, well, are they just chasing certainty, comfort, and safety? Or are they looking out for uncertainty, challenge, and variety? Are they after significance or respect in their role? Are they all about connection? Are they about growth? Or the 6th need, contribution? So understanding your employees through that lens is going to be really important, because if you can speak to their need, it's going to help you keep them for longer because you're speaking their language. You're not treating people how you want to be treated. You're treating people how they want to be treated. Attitude and energy. Once again, are they expanding and contracting when they come into the office or the workspace? Are they adding or subtracting, or neither? Are they pessimistic, optimistic? How are they showing up, and what really serves you and your business? Their strengths and weaknesses, their standards and expectations for others. So especially if you're a CEO or managing director and you've got a team of leaders and executives working beneath you, what are their expectations for other people? And is there room for improvement there? As well as what are their standards for themselves? What is their relationship with challenge? Do they default to blame, denial, hiding? Do they close off from you and kind of fall away into their own little silo and become rogue? Do they overexpress themselves? Do they demand, or do they project their BS onto you and everyone else instead of taking responsibility? How behaviorally flexible or versus rigid are they? Another more logical one here is character role alignment. Are they actually suited to being a salesperson, or would they be better off in customer service? Do they have the ability from time to time to be a hammer and hit a whole heap of nails, or are they maybe too soft, maybe too much about relationships, which comes at the expense of getting sales and challenging people to overcome their own objections? So are they the right fit for their role? Now, the one that we really want to focus on, so Penner's level of engagement. This is a great model, as well as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Can I just get a show of hands? Please just raise your hand or comment in the chat if you've heard of either of these models. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, good personal development model. We've also got Penner's 5 levels of engagement, but this is a bit of a hybrid where we're kind of looking at them blended together. So level 1, all about survival. So just think and reflect for a moment with your team members and employees. Who here is stuck in level 1, where they're just focused on getting paid, clock watching, and just doing the bare minimum? You might have one or a couple of people that come to mind. Well, these people aren't engaged. Level 2, security, focused on having a job tomorrow and just maintaining the status quo. Level 3, it's a bit more about belonging, being a part of the culture. So they're engaged and often engaged for others. They're kind of just going along with it, going with the flow. So they're engaged, but it's more so for others. Level 4, improvement, focused on learning and developing in their career. So they're engaged with a slant towards being engaged for themselves. And then level 5, this is leadership. This is focused more on self-actualizing and being all that they can be for themselves and for the company. So they're highly engaged for themselves and for others. Can I get a show of hands if you're a leader in an organization, if you sit in level 5, for instance, you're engaged for you and you're engaged for others? Fantastic. Awesome. Can I get a show of hands if you think you've got some people stuck in level 1? Focused on getting paid and survival. And just to touch on what Babalan was sharing at the beginning, how we went from Babalan, I just want to get your comments on this, overlaying this model here. So you mentioned that we're going from through those
Survival.
3 different industry transitions. Yeah,
Yep.
what were those again?
It's like from survival mode. So basically during the industrial revolution, it's more about less of opportunities. So as a human being, we were in a survival mode. From then, the media, the information revolution. So basically we moved away from a survival mode to a standard of living mode. Now we have moved away from a standard of living. Today, it's all about quality, which
Yep.
means it's all about how we kind of balance between the organizational needs and expectations versus our own team members' needs and expectations.
Yep, spot on. And I wanted you to share that, Babalan, because I feel like that almost ties in with, maybe back in the day, as you were referring to, people were more focused on in a survival, like a level 1 and a level 2 mentality. Then we've gone through to more of a belonging mentality.
Correct.
And now organizations, in order to keep up, in order to increase employee retention, reduce turnover, up engagement and performance, leaders and business owners, would you say that they really need to focus on how can they get their employees operating in level 4 and level 5?
I would, my take, Brad, is that it has to be a good combination of 3, 4, and 5. The more and more as a leaders, if we kind of make our team members, you're talking about belonging. In fact, if you look at even a human nature, it's all about recognition and showing them that sense of appreciation and making them and giving them the feeler how important they are in terms of their contributions. That's what we are talking about, belonging. Now, once you have that,
sure.
that itself becomes a culture. So I feel that that's very, very, very important. Then it is basically focusing on their expectations, what kind of growth plans they have vis-a-vis the organizational goals. So then obviously, which means they are kind of progressing from belonging to an improvement to a leadership role. That's how I would look at it. What most of the time the challenges that the leaders have is kind of showing your team members through the path of 3 to 4 to 5.
Yeah, well said, well said. And who here agrees with that? And who here is focused on that? How can we get our employees belonging more, feeling like they're a part of something great and exciting, as well as taking initiative to improve themselves in their career and contribute to the company as a whole? Can I get a show of hands who here feels that that is really, really important when it comes to moving the needle? And does anyone want to comment on this particular slide? Maybe you've got thoughts, questions. Anyone want to share their thoughts and comments around this? And I do understand that we're going deep. Like, we're not just having a surface level conversation about the what. What is leadership? We're really getting into the nitty gritty and giving you a lot to think about and reflect on. So I'll assume and take that your silence is just contemplating and soaking it up. Can I at least get a show of hands if that's the case and you're just thinking? Yep, awesome. Yep, a couple of you, fantastic. Once again, don't feel you have to memorize this and write everything down, because if you want access to the slide deck, you can have it afterwards as well. So, all right, what we'll do is I'll just see if there was anything else here in my notes to share on this slide. I think one of the key things here, so if we look at meta programs for a second, the more than human, less than human, this was a model founded by Sharon Pearson. She's one of the greatest personal and professional coaches around human behavior. And I believe she took some of this knowledge and information from Dr. John Demartini. Who here has heard of Dr. John Demartini before? He talks about this concept as well of being more than human or less than human. Are we putting ourselves on a pedestal and then putting others in a pit, versus putting ourselves in a pit and others in a pedestal, on a pedestal? That's something very important to be mindful of, because this will impact greatly on the relationship that we have and our ability to develop our team members. And I'll touch more on that in a moment with a model that I'm going to share with you once we get past missing the following missing elements. So these are some questions that I really want you to reflect on. The missing element number 3, a greater degree of relationship awareness. So knowing how the way you behave influences the way your employees behave and develop, and vice versa. So I'll read through these questions and I'd love for you to pick one question. Pick one question. If you want to write it down, you can. But I just want you to think about that one question for a little bit more when we jump off this webinar and you go about the rest of your day. How does your leadership style influence the way your employees lead with you or follow you? Are they growing, or is their growth being stunted? How does the collision of your beliefs and values and your employees' beliefs and values impact your relationship with each other? Is the relationship further united and expanded, which, mind you, is a reflection of how well you hired that employee, being a cultural fit or not? Or is it separated and silenced? Is there more of a passive dynamic taking place? And how can you bridge that gap to increase connection and cohesion with that particular team member or team members? How do your tendencies with being controlling or allowing impact on how much accountability and responsibility they demonstrate? And how does it impact on their ability to perform either with independence and autonomy or dependence and reliance on you? So are they taking charge, or are they being subservient? And what is really serving you in your business? See, for instance, if you're perpetuating subservient behavior, you're actually not leveraging your team members as effectively as you can because you're addicted and too focused on being controlling. Or it could be on the flip side where you're too subservient and they're taking charge, but they're not moving in the direction that's best for the company. And they're kind of running their own agenda. They're in their own lane. That can also be quite unhelpful. How does your level of introversion or extroversion perpetuate their level of introversion or extroversion? For instance, if you're extroverted, are you extroverted to the point that you overpower them and they stay stuck in their shell? Or are you introverted, and because you're introverted, they're extroverted, they're cracked wide open, so to speak, and they're just constantly trying to manage you and manage everything else instead of taking care of themselves because you're introverted or behaving introverted. So kind of like the idea of, do they shrink or expand when you shrink or expand? So paying attention to that dynamic. And I understand we are getting, becoming quite an in-depth conversation, but we're not here to have a level 1 conversation around leadership. We want to give you the breadth and depth to then choose what you do with your leadership journey in this webinar. How does your directedness or passivity perpetuate their level of accountability, transparency, and communication with you, and vice versa? How does your aversion to vulnerability or discomfort with being direct in the moment impact on their ability to embrace feedback, learn and grow, and vice versa? How does your level of rigidity versus flexibility perpetuate their level of confidence, psychological safety, and ability to do their best in their role? So if you're really rigid and just barking orders, how safe do they feel to do the best they can? Or on the flip side, if you're too flexible, how is this actually stunting their growth because you're not challenging them enough or holding them accountable? So questioning that. How do your strengths perpetuate their weaknesses and vice versa? And how can we begin to correct that? Is it either working on some of your weaknesses, helping them work on some of theirs? What does that look like? And how does your level of care and focus with certain aspects of business impact on what they care about and to what degree? For instance, if you just care about relationships and not your financials, does this then have them focus more on financials because you're not? And then that comes at the expense of relationships? Or like, to what degree are they compensating for what you focus and care about? As an example. So once again, you might be going, wow, geez, Brad, you've thrown a heap of questions at me and you've just left me feeling confused. Just know you're not meant to have all the answers right now and have it laid out in front of you. That's the point of these questions. These questions are just to broaden and open up your thinking and get you thinking more subtly about your relationship dynamic with your employees and your people. And once again, if there's a question that sticks out for you here, I'd love for you to write it down. And what we might do is there a particular question that does stand out to anyone that they want to discuss in more detail? Is there anything that stands out to you with one of these questions or resonates with you, or is maybe a bit of an aha moment? Maybe you've realized that, crikey, I am too controlling, and therefore I'm not leveraging my people. I'm paying them a good wage, but I'm actually not leveraging them well enough because I'm still trying to do everything. I'm stuck amongst the weeds, I'm controlling. Anyone want to share anything? And Babalan, maybe is there anything you want to add to around relationships, understanding that the space in between you and your team members?
On the third missing element of all the questions listed here, my take is the second question is a very, very, very important question, because as a leader, we need to understand and appreciate that every individual is a human being. Their value system to a greater extent depends on on the environment, the culture, the education system. There are too many factors. So the very big question, if I have to add value on this third missing element, it's very, very, very important for us as a leader to understand the belief system and values of our employees. And in fact, you end the question saying that how can you bridge the gap to increase connection? Because there's never going to be a perfect situation where our team members are going to be exactly in line with our organization goals and objectives. So how much we understand, respect each other, and how we bridge the gap, that I believe is very, very, very important.
Well said, well said. And can I get a show of hands or a comment in the chat of who here agrees with that one being absolutely crucial or key? Awesome. Philip. Awesome, Philip. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to change gears and I'm going to share a model with you. And once again, I don't want you to focus on all the text. I just want you to focus on the overall essence of the model. And it's called the 5 S's of leadership influence. So just rather than trying to read it all and soak it all up, I just want you to look at the quadrant in the middle. when you communicate as a leader or a business owner with your team members, do you step forward and step up, which means often you're talking down to your team members? Do you step forward but step down, so you're kind of more of a servant and going, hey, how can I help you guys? What's going on? How can I support you? Are you a bit more passive where you step back and step down and you're not really engaged, and maybe your employees are kind of running the show and giving orders to you? I have come across that where employees end up having power over you and they're kind of running their own agenda and having a greater impact and influence than you are, because maybe you're a bit more passive or introverted, or basically passive and introverted, and not knowing how to kind of step forward and step up a little bit. And then the last one here, in terms of the dynamic that you play in your organization, you've stepped back, but you're still stepping up, which means that you're looking down on people, but you're looking down on people from afar. So when you engage in a conversation, often I come across people, right? And I'm sure you come across people too, like, geez, I didn't really like that person. Chances are it's because they either stepped forward and they stepped up and they were talking down to you or disagreeing with you or mismatching everything you said and nitpicking, or they didn't really give much to the conversation, right? They didn't really give much, but it was still like there was this superior air about them, that they were better than you, or, they weren't bringing much to the table. They were kind of not engaged, okay? And then on the flip side, there's maybe an interaction or someone you can think of that you get along with really, really well. And it's because in most of their engagements or interactions with other people, they step forward, but they're also there to serve. And then maybe there's people that you've come across that seem to be a bit passive, a bit disconnected. They're not a threat to you, but they're just disconnected. So they've stepped back and they've stepped down. Is this model making sense so far as I've explained it? Does that make sense? So as you can see here, you've got passive versus active, then you've got inferior versus superior. So inferiority complex in some way, I need to take care of others. Superior complex, everyone else needs to take care of me. And then space holder versus space filler. And then you've got agreeable versus disagreeable, okay? So then we've got in the middle here something quite interesting, standing still. This is really, really interesting. So you might come across people that hold space for you. They don't react. So they don't say, for instance, if you're someone who resorts to stepping down and looking up at people, putting yourself in a pit and other people on a pedestal, but they hold a space in such a way that enables you to no longer put yourself in a pit or on a pedestal. And it just feels like you're having a conversation with another human being. There's no games, there's no power dynamics going on. You can just be your authentic self, and you can self-actualize, you can be vulnerable in front of them, so on and so forth. The standing still is really the space that we want to hang out in as a leader, and that we will actually have the most influence. For instance, if you're stuck in any one of these quadrants, you're actually creating reaction in other people to either, say, for instance, if you step forward and step up, chances are you might have someone else that's hot-headed and they'll step forward and step up as well and butt heads with you. Or they might step back and step down and be a coward and might not contribute. So whenever you're in any of these quadrants, you're actually creating reaction in other people, which can stunt development. So you need to figure out as a leader, how can you move between these quadrants as and when needed based on the situation? For instance, you might have someone that's overpowering and isn't contributing to the organization. So you have to step forward and step up to put them in line, okay? There might be other situations where you've got to step back and step down to help someone realize that it's safe to take the lead, okay? But if you can hang out in the middle here, standing still for the most part, you're actually going to enable people to go on their own journey without you getting in the way. So you're in a state of non-reactivity, neutrality. You're not positioning yourself above and you're not positioning yourself below. You're actually holding space and enabling people to grow. So you're more behaviorally flexible. Can I just get a show of hands? I know this model is, it's complex. It's not simple. Have I explained that well enough for you to grasp it? Can I just get a show of hands? Is it pretty straightforward? Let me know if it's confusing as well. Right, and we are running short on time, so we've got 3 more minutes. Perhaps we can run overtime for maybe another 5, if so we can run until 5:12. Can I get a thumbs up if everyone's cool with that? Yeah, and if you have to go, don't worry. We can get you access to the recording as well as the slide deck, just so you're aware. So that covers the missing elements, missing elements 1, 2, and 3 with a model that I've shared with you to help you navigate your relationship awareness with others. So that was the purpose of sharing this model with you. It's a great tool to help you understand, well, which quadrant do I need to be in for which individual, and how can I become more in the middle of the quadrant, okay? What I'd love for you to do now is write down, and even if you don't get 3, but just get 1, defining your leadership goals. So what do you want to change about your leadership style and why? Just write down one thing. Take a moment to write down one thing and just comment in the chat once you've done that. So what do you want to change about your leadership style and why? And I'm going to go back to the first slide here. So around self-awareness. And have a look through here. Is it around beliefs, values, blind spots, your expectations? Is it your leadership style specifically? Like, do you want to lead more from the front, the middle, the back? Do you want to be more confrontational? And I don't mean that negatively, but it can be negative. But do you want to be more active? So write down one leadership development goal for yourself that you want to work on. And please just comment done once you've done it. I'd like everyone here that is tuned into this webinar to comment. Let's keep our standards high, keep our engagement high. I want to see that chat. Done. Okay. Just one thing. All right, what we'll do is we'll go back here. So what do you want to change about your leader's leadership style? So Greg, I believe you said with some of your team members, think about how you would like to influence them in the right direction. What is it that you would want to see within your leaders or your employees? Write down just one thing. It could be becoming more engaged, it could be caring more, it could be showing greater initiative, it could be taking control, whatever it is. Just write down one thing. Please give me a thumbs up if you've got your camera on, if you've done that. If not, that's all good. Or comment in the chat. Are you stuck there, Greg, or you're just thinking? Just give me a thumbs up. Oh, cool, awesome. And Mark, Pierce, Moe, Jasmine, and Philip, please just engage in the chat if you can. If you're driving or doing something else and it's not safe to, then please don't. But if you can engage, we would love your engagement. So just comment done when you've done that. And then lastly, defining your company culture development goals. What do you want to change about your company culture and why? And let's just go and refer to the others awareness slide for a moment. And you might want to refer to Penner's level of engagement, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maybe how can we get people out of survival and security and in a space of belonging, improving and leading and contributing? So once again, what do you want to change about your company culture and why? One thing. And please comment done once you've taken care of that. Great. Awesome. We will have to move through this. And hey, I just want to say for those of you that have stuck on here for the whole time as well, I know we have run a couple of minutes over, really appreciate your engagement. That's what makes these webinars all the more fun and worthwhile when you hang out from start till finish. Lastly, so missing element number 5, a lack of leadership and culture development models to reference. We're not going to go through all of these, but I'm just giving you some suggestions and ideas that you can look into to further give yourself some frameworks for leadership development and to impart onto your team members as well. So there's some leadership development models and some culture development models. What I'd like to do for the next minute is share with you quickly how we go about turning managers into leaders. Don't feel that you have to read all of this. If you want to sit back and just listen to what I have to say, you can. But essentially, one of the key, most important things is actually helping them get their foundation sorted. So how can we get them to improve on their time and task management, reporting, hitting their hard targets, so that they can actually focus more on these softer elements within their role, the softer targets. If, once again, like I shared at the start, if they're stuck in a state of necessity and survival, it's going to be hard for them to focus on possibility and shaping and influencing their team members. They'll just be stuck in a manager's mindset and just trying to manage their own stuff and meeting their own needs, let alone meeting other people's needs. So that's probably the one that will move the needle the most. Also helping them to raise their own standards and expectations of themselves and getting them to live more of an examined life. So questioning themselves, giving themselves feedback, asking them more daring questions, encouraging greater demonstration of vulnerability from them through the form of seeking feedback, encouraging your leaders to not just focus on what is getting done and by when, which is once again more of the management mindset, but being super curious towards their employees, really understanding them on that deeper level, which is what we covered earlier on. Helping your leaders to define what specifically they want to develop and change within themselves. So helping them articulate that is really important. Is it taking more initiative? Is it being more confident when having confronting conversations? Is it getting better with structure and holding people accountable? What is it? And then taking them on that journey. And then lastly, which this presentation will serve as for you, is equip and educate them with tools, resources, and models that they can follow and that will activate greater levels of inspiration within them that they can then pass on to their team. And I'm sure there's 100 other things, right? But I wanted to just try and bring it back down to what are the raw elements that's going to help you turn your manager into a leader. And before we wrap up, Babalan, was there anything you wanted to add around this? Are you obviously managing an organization of 400 plus employees? You're on mute as well, by the way.
Definitely, Brad. You know, what I wanted to add is, in fact, you started with that context. There is never going to be a right a set of leadership style that's going to suit each and every situation. Sometimes the leader, we need to kind of amend ourselves and then adjust according to these circumstances and kind of lead the team and the business. So from my perspective, over the last 14 years, that's what I've learned. There's never going to be one style of leadership. In fact, if I have to give you a small story, in the context of building the team, sometimes I'm forced to take a carrot approach. Sometimes I'm forced to take carrot and stick approach. Sometimes I'm forced to take just a stick approach, which means the reason why I say carrot and stick and a stick approach, again, it depends on the situation of the business. If I have to conclude why these three approaches are required, is that in any given situation, number one, our products and services that are consumed by our clients, they are going to be kind of in the picture. The second one is our own team members, because they are the ones who are delivering the products and services. And then the third is all other stakeholders. That stakeholders can be equity shareholders, suppliers, and all the stakeholders. So in every decision making of a leader, a good leader is that he has to consider all the three components of any business, and then consider the situation and which produces the best objective outcome, putting all the parties in a win-win situation. And that leader would be a very successful leader. Sometimes you might have to take, sometimes even, whether you need to take an employee side or the organization side, we need to look at the circumstances. Sometimes if the leader has to take a strong action saying that in this scenario, given the circumstances, it is better to take the organizational goals than the employee goals, the leader has to take it.
Yeah.
That's what I have kind of seen in my experience, Brad.
Yeah. Well said. Lots of insights there as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. So
And
do you,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'll just so recap. We obviously covered statistics, what stops organizations from having great leadership, the 5 missing elements, how to turn managers into leaders, live Q&A. So before we just if anyone has any questions, I just want to share with you that if you'd like to claim a complimentary leadership and development consultation with me, which is where we will help unpack where you're at within your leadership development journey and how you can get the most out of your team members and influence them and help them become the best leaders that they can be, just send me an email. You can type as simple as the word leadership to brad@bridgepointgroup.com.au, or feel free to send a bit more of some information to provide a bit of context. So brad@bridgepointgroup.com.au. And I know we said we'll finish at 12:05. We'll just go till 10 past. Did anyone have any questions before Babalan wraps it up for us? Anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and fire away. Or can I get a show of hands or a thumbs up or a wave if you're left in deep contemplation? Yep. Awesome. So I've given you a lot. This is a resource that you can take home, or that you can take with you and just further reflect on. Zoom out so that you don't get bogged down and stuck in the chaos, and just realize that it's about developing greater awareness of others, the relationship in between, the direction that you want to head in. So getting really clear on defining your leadership and culture development goals, and then filling your war chest and backing yourself with some models and frameworks to help you go on that journey. And now when it comes to your individual situation or individual employee or whatever's going on, we can have a more tailored and personalized conversation to figure out, well, how can we really move the needle within your own leadership ability and also to have the greatest impact on the rest of your company. With that said, thanks so much for your engagement, and I'll hand it over to Babalan to wrap up.
Yep. Thank you so much, Brad. It was really, really insightful, and I think it's kind of a complicated topic, and I'm sure everyone can read at leisure. As Brad said, it's more for us, kind of make ourselves think, just be aware of what's there in terms of leadership as a concept. So thank you so much for everyone for joining the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot an email to either Brad or to us. And even this session is kind of recorded. If anyone wanted the recorded version of the webinar, please email us and we'll be all the more happy to share that. Thank you once again, and hoping to see you all in the next webinar.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brad.
Babalan. Thanks,
Lakshmi.
guys.
Thank you, guys. Good afternoon. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.